everyone. Welcome back to third episode of the podcast series. I'm Cherry, and today we are going to talk about something that has been gaining serious momentum in American politics: populist left. Now, that term gets thrown around a lot, sometimes as praise, sometimes as criticism. But what does it actually mean? And more importantly, why is it rising now? All right, let's begin. Populist left politics is built on a simple idea that the system is not working for ordinary people and has not been for a long time. It focuses on economic inequality, corporate power, and the growing gap between the wealthy and everyone else. It argues that a small group of elites have too much influence over politics, over policy, and over everyday life. And if that sounds familiar, it's because a lot of Americans are starting to feel it too. Wages have stagnated, the cost of living has gone up, healthcare is still expensive, student debt is crushing millions of people, and for many, the idea of the American dream feels more distant than ever. This is the environment where populist left movements grow, not out of nowhere, but out of frustration. Now, let's talk about one of the newer faces connected to this wave: Mamdani. A figure who represents a younger, more direct and unapologetic version of left-wing politics. Someone who speaks clearly about inequality, calls out corporate influence, and doesn't soften the message to make it more acceptable. And that is the part of the appeal, because for a long time many voters felt like traditional politicians were too careful, too calculated, too disconnected. Populist left figures do not speak like that; they are more blunt, more confrontational, and for a growing number of people that feels honest. But this rise did not happen in isolation. It's also a reaction to decades of policy decisions that prioritized markets over people, a reaction to financial crisis where ordinary citizens paid the price, while large institutions were protected. A reaction to a political system where lobbying power often outweighs public interest. So, when someone comes along and says, "This system is broken," people listen. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because populism is not exclusive to the left. We have also seen a strong rise in right-wing populism. But the two are very different. Right-wing populism often focuses on identity, nationalism, and cultural issues. Populist left focus on economics, on wealth distribution, on access, on fairness. And right now, economic pressure is something a lot of people are feeling. That's why this message is spreading, especially among younger generations, people who grew up during economic instability, who entered adulthood during crisis, who do not have the same financial security previous generations had. For them, this is not theoretical, it's personal. But let's be clear about something: the rise of populist left politics doesn't mean easy solutions. It raises big questions about taxation, about government spending, about the role of the state, and not everyone agrees on the answers. Critics argued that some of the design is unrealistic, or too expensive, or too disruptive. Supporters argued that the current system is already failing and that bold change is necessary. And that is the debate. But regardless of where you stand, one thing is undeniable: this movement is growing and it's changing the conversation. Issues that were once considered too radical are now being discussed openly. Ideas that were once dismissed are now part of mainstream debate. And voices that were once ignored are getting louder. So, the real question is not whether populist left politics matters, it's how much it will reshape the future. Because political movements do not rise like this without a reason. They rise because something underneath is shifting. In future episodes, we will keep exploring these shifts. where they come from, where they are going, and what they mean, not just for America, but for the world. Because understanding this change is no longer optional, it's necessary. That's why this podcast exists, that's why I'm here, and that's why you are listening. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me for the third episode. Stay tuned for the next one, and if this conversation made you think, share it with someone around you. Because those conversations matter and that voice deserves to be heard. Until next time.